I don't even know where to begin this story, because the more time passes, the harder it is for me to believe myself that it really happened. But at the same time, I still sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and catch myself listening to the silence, as if I'm waiting for it to happen again. And the scariest thing is that I'm not sure it actually ended that night. My name is Artyom. I'm 24 years old, and at that time, my life was like most people's. A regular job during the day, exhaustion in the evening, and a constant desire to earn some extra money somewhere. So when I was offered a side job, I didn't think for long. An acquaintance sent me an address and said I needed to go at night to an old substation outside the city and check the equipment. Supposedly the power sometimes goes out there and the guard can't handle it, and they pay well for it because few people agree to go there at night. At first I smirked, thought it was just another scary story to raise the price, but I really needed the money, so I agreed. Closer to midnight I set off. The road was normal at first. Then there was a stretch without streetlights. Around me there was only forest, rare power line poles, and the wind that howled as if someone was crying in the distance. The signal started to disappear, but I was already almost there, so I didn't turn back. After some time, I saw a concrete fence and rusty gates. One side was slightly open, and I drove inside. The territory was large but empty. Several buildings and one main substation building with a faint light coming from it. I parked, turned off the engine, and immediately felt how quiet it was here. Not just quiet, but as if the sound had disappeared completely. Even my own footsteps sounded muffled, like through cotton. I took a flashlight and went to the building. The door was open. Inside it smelled like dust and something burnt, but not strongly, just an unpleasant smell, as if something had burned a long time ago and was left there. I shouted, "Is anyone here?" But the answer was silence. Only somewhere far away the equipment was humming. I went inside. The corridor was long and narrow, doors on both sides, with old signs on them that were almost unreadable. The lights flickered, and sometimes completely went out for a second. And in those moments, I felt uneasy inside, even though nothing scary seemed to be happening. I kept walking, and at some point noticed that one of the doors ahead was slightly open, and a brighter light was coming from there than in the other places. I thought that was where the guard was, or the control room I needed, and headed there. But the closer I got, the more I felt the cold. Even though the building itself wasn't warm, here it suddenly became much colder, as if there was a draft coming from there. I stopped at the door, listened. It seemed quiet, only a faint buzzing. I pushed the door and looked inside. The room was almost empty. Just old panels and boards with wires. The lamp on the ceiling was glowing steadily, but the light was unpleasant, pale. I took a step inside, looked around. No one was there, only wires and old equipment. But at that moment, I noticed one detail. There were footprints on the floor, as if someone had been walking barefoot. And the footprints didn't lead to the exit, but deeper into the room, toward a wall where there were no doors or passages. I frowned, came closer, and realized that the footprints seemed to end right at the wall, as if the person had simply disappeared. I felt something tighten inside me, but still tried to calm myself down. Maybe the dirt just settled that way. I was about to leave when suddenly I heard a quiet sound behind me, as if someone ran their hand over metal. I turned around sharply, but the room was empty. I stood there for a couple of seconds and suddenly realized that the sound hadn't stopped. It was very quiet, but constant, as if someone was slowly scratching a surface somewhere very close. I turned off the flashlight to hear better, and at that moment, the lamp above flickered and went out for a split second. And in that second, I saw in the reflection of the panel a silhouette behind me, tall and unnaturally thin. I quickly turned the flashlight back on and turned around. No one. My heart started beating faster. I already understood something was wrong and that I needed to leave. I quickly went out into the corridor and headed for the exit, but after a few steps I stopped because I realized the corridor looked different. The doors seemed to have changed places, and there was even less light. I turned back. That room was gone. Instead, there was a closed door without any gaps. I came closer, pulled the handle. It wouldn't open. The cold inside became stronger. I started walking faster, almost running, but I couldn't find the exit. The corridor seemed endless, and at some point, I heard footsteps behind me. At first quiet, then faster. They didn't match mine. I stopped. The footsteps stopped too. I suddenly turned around and at the end of the corridor saw a figure. It stood motionless, but in the next moment, it jerked forward too quickly, as if it had been pulled. I ran without thinking where. The lights flickered more and more often, and suddenly went out completely for a second. And in the darkness, I heard the footsteps get very close, almost right next to my ear. I rushed forward blindly, hit a wall, but found a doorway, ran into some room, then another, and finally saw the same entrance door. It was closed, even though I clearly remembered leaving it open. I started pulling it, but it wouldn't budge, and at that moment, I heard breathing behind me, slow and heavy. I didn't turn around. I just kept hitting the door with all my strength, and suddenly, it swung open. I burst outside, ran to the car, got in, started it, and sped off without looking back. I drove out of the gates, and only when I got onto the road did I slow down a bit. My hands were shaking, my breathing was uneven, but I thought it was over, until I looked in the rearview mirror and saw that something dark was lying on the back seat. At first I thought it was a jacket or a bag, but then it slowly rose, and I saw long arms and a head that moved in jerks. I screamed and slammed the brakes, jumped out of the car, ran to the roadside and stood there, not understanding what to do. The car stood with the headlights on. It was quiet inside. After a few seconds, I cautiously approached, looked inside and saw nothing. The seat was empty, but there were long, thin marks on the upholstery, as if someone had run their fingers across it, and those marks were slowly disappearing right before my eyes. I didn't check anymore, got back in, and drove without stopping all the way to the city. When I arrived, it was already morning. I decided I would never go there again and tried to forget everything like a bad dream. But a few days later, I started noticing strange things. At first, it was sounds at night, as if someone was walking around the apartment, very quietly. Then marks began to appear on the floor that disappeared if you stared at them for too long. And one day I woke up because I felt cold next to me and saw that a shadow on the wall near the bed was slowly moving, even though the light was off. And since then, I realized one thing. I didn't leave that place alone. And the scariest part is that it doesn't always show itself. But sometimes, when the room becomes too quiet, I hear that same sound, as if someone is slowly running their hand over metal, and then I try not to move, because it feels like if I do, it will understand that I noticed it.